Welcome back to the Piping Pastor, Theology Talks. Today we'll be discussing money and the church. Well, as I promised, I'm going to be displaying my newest acquisition, my new pipe, and here it is. I have to kind of back up a little bit to get this whole thing in, but this is my new Meerschaum Church Warden, and you can see, let me get the camera lined up here, very well carved face, and the eyes are these little green jewelette things in there. I'm not even sure what they're made of, but it's one of those sectional meerschaums. So this part comes apart and this part comes apart, but I rather kind of like the whole thing together. This makes me feel much rather like Bilbo in the Hobbit. In the book, it talks about the wooden pipe he's smoking as Gandalf comes up that reached nearly down to his furry toes, neatly brushed. This one really does reach down to my toes. So it's a beautiful pipe. I got this at an estate auction, unsmoked. Well, it's smoked now. It's the second time I smoked in it, actually. But I bought this at an estate sale, unsmoked, for $20. And it is a block meerschaum. Came with a little certificate. It's not composite. So once again, estate sales are the way to go. We're really rather blessed here in Maryland. There's quite a few, a lot of older estates in and around the East Coast. So I know in other areas of the states, they're not quite as easy to come across, but it's worth looking for and investing the time in. This one was about 2 hours away. But for a pipe like this, and we got a couple other things as well. The wife got a couple things. We both enjoyed doing those estate sales. So definitely worth it. And in this lovely new pipe, I am smoking a lovely new tobacco from Mylan. I already discussed the cherry bonbon that I got, which is a nice tobacco, but again, swing and a miss with the purpose. But I'm still going to keep it around. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm getting the cherry bonbon. Let me try a couple other things from there as well, because Brother Onion over at the 2 a.m. pipe on the patio speaks very highly of Mylan because it's his brick and mortar, and he's mentioned Joe's Blend. So let me give that a go. So I got some Joe's Blend and also their Balkan. And today and yesterday I've been smoking Joe's Blend. And it's wonderful. I'm really rather impressed. It's an English blend, Burley Latakia in Virginia. Very light, sweet, creamy, really round mouthfeel. The burley doesn't bite at all. Sometimes, for me anyway, I think burley can come across a little harsh. It reminds me of my cigarette days from back in the 90s, and it's probably just a mental association. But for that reason, for me, burleys have to be blended pretty well for me to enjoy them. Sometimes they come across a bit much for me, but this one is delightful. So And once again, supporting a local brick and mortar, even though I have to order through the mail. So I'm definitely going to be, Joe's Blend is definitely going to be part of my mixture. And I'll be trying the Balkan here in the next few days once I smoke through some more of this. So I will let you know what I think of the Balkan. Felt like a smoke ring, the length of this pipe. I will say that the one downside of this, it has a really narrow draw. So the Joe's Blend is ideal because it's a ribbon cut. As long as you don't pack it too tightly, it works just fine, burns all the way through. And meerschaum in itself is probably my favorite pipe material. Of course, I like briar, and I have the ebony pipe, and all the various different woods that you can smoke out of all have their merits. But for me, I think meerschaum burns the best when it comes to really getting through all the tobacco. Sometimes with, especially if I mess up and pack it too tight, I can end up in a briar pipe having some tobacco at the bottom when I think I'm done, and it doesn't burn all the way through. But meerschaum, for me anyway, does a really good job of burning through all the tobacco. So when I'm done, I'm smoking, I'm like, oh, is it? I go in, I pick a little bit, I'm like, oh, it's all ash. That was brilliant. So I'm happy with my $20 purchase. Not a pipe I'll probably be traveling with, but definitely one I'll enjoy around the house, or in this area anyway, not throughout the whole house. Well, I did not have to preach today. Today's Sunday. I'm enjoying my post-church pipe. So I got to sit and listen to a sermon today. Happily, I get to do that one or two Sundays a month where I can just sit back and listen to another person preach, whether it's a guest speaker or sometimes I'll go to a different church entirely and sit and listen to another pastor. Sometimes I get invited to listen, and this is one of those instances. So, and at this particular church, they have a lot of different ways to give. Now, since the pandemic, most churches have expanded their online giving platforms. That way, that you can use your app on your phone to give online and things like that. It was a whole contactless payment thing that was really popular during COVID, and so that's become kind of the norm. But this church also has a way where you can give stock as part of your tithe. So rather than paying capital gains on your stock, you can sign it over to the church as a tax-free donation. It's like, oh, wow, okay. But they spent several minutes talking about the form and function of how you do this and things like that. There's nothing wrong with giving at church and tithing and so on and so forth. Of course, it's one of the things we talk about in Christianity, in mere Christianity, is the tithe. But it occurred to me because they were taking a long time to explain it. And I thought, wow, if you have a guest visiting for the first time, they're going to be sitting here, and for the first 10, 15 minutes of the service, all you're talking about is how to get money. And that is a point of contention for a lot of people, Christians and non-Christians alike. That the church is all about getting money. Now, a couple things about that. First of all, it's okay to pay your pastor. Paul talks about that. It's in there a few different times, right? All the way back to the provision of sacrifices for the priest in Leviticus, right? So it's all throughout the Bible. Pastors, ministers, priests, they have to make a living, right? They have to eat. So it's okay to pay your pastor. But when it comes to tithing in the church, when it comes to giving in the church, there's a lot of contention about it. Should I tithe? Should I not tithe? How much should I tithe? 10%, the first 10%, 10% prior to all the deductions. Is it 10% of the gross? Is it 10% of the net? Can I volunteer my time instead of the money? Is 10% the bare minimum? Should I give more than that? Does charitable giving count? Does giving to church organizations or Christian organizations count, right? What if I go to more than one church? There's a great deal of legalism when it comes to giving money in the church, and a great deal of consternation. Now, there is a biblical basis for the tithe that goes all the way back to the New Testament. Earliest example, of course, we have is from Abraham, right? Offering 10% of his spoils to Melchizedek, which we can talk about in another video, perhaps, about pre-incarnate Christ and what that looks like. So that's one of the earliest examples we have. Of course, even before that, the examples of Cain and Abel bringing their sacrifices to the Lord, right? But in terms of tithe, in terms of time, a treasure, and so forth, giving to a priest, an earthly priest, because I think is probably the earliest example. But what's the point? Why do it? Does God need your money? Everything is God's. The Bible says, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. This is God's universe. God created this universe, right? It's kind of like, when I give my kids money, because they want to buy me a birthday present or a Christmas present or something else like that, right? I mean, yeah, they're giving me the present, but I'm the one really paying for it, right? It's the same kind of thing. So we're not really giving God anything of ours. We're giving God back some of what God already owns. God does not need our money. It's not about the money. It's about the heart issue. It's about where you place your trust. Do you place your trust in yourself, in your money, in your in your security, your financial security, or do you place your trust in God? If you're willing to give money to the church, it demonstrates a faith, right? It's an outgrowth of your faith. There's an equal faith. It doesn't give you a free pass to faith, to develop your faith, but it's an outgrowth of it. If you have faith in God, if you trust God, then you're not worried about money, then you have no problem giving money to the church, right? So it's not about amounts and things like that. It's about where your heart is. And that's over and over and over again in the Bible. When Satan rose up against David, and David did a census, right? The nation of Israel was punished, not because of the census itself, it's because of the heart issue behind it. Because just a few chapters earlier, God commands that a census be done, right? But this census was done by David so he could see how much money he had, right? He wanted to see how powerful he was, how many soldiers he had. His heart issue. It was a heart issue. His heart was in the wrong place. So it wasn't the action. It was the heart issue behind it, right? It's the same kind of thing with tithing. It's all about where your heart is. And you don't give to your church, and your church collapses and falls. Well, then that's a church that was relying too much on itself. If a church is begging you for money to keep the doors open, and they say something like, "Oh, if we don't get $10,000 by the end of this Sunday, we're gonna have to close the doors." You know what I would say? I would say, okay, close the doors. Because if God's not blessing the ministry, if God's hand is not on that church, providing for that church through God's blessings, then maybe it's time for that church to close and for that minister and that staff to go serve elsewhere. Maybe there's something else going on there. But human control of money should not be what keeps an organization, a church going, an organization like that going. Because then it ceases to be God's ministry, it starts to become our ministry, which is not how it's supposed to work. Should you tithe? Yes. But you should tithe, again, out as an outgrowth of your faith. In the same way that we love and act charitably towards others. It's an outgrowth of our faith. It's an outward exhibition of the inner transformation that we have as Christians. So don't get hung up on the math. 10% is just there so we can have something to grasp onto, so we can say, okay, we know we'll give this much, right? Give as much as you feel like. But if you start worrying about how much you're giving, you start worrying about holding on to it, then you should examine your heart and see where you are with your walk with God. But the key thing is the faith issue, where it comes from the inside. Well, we have covered church and politics and church and money in the last 2 videos. I'm getting all kinds of controversial. But they are theological questions that have a great deal of importance. So, again, any further questions about that, feel free to let me know. I'm going to turn back to my giant pipe and my lovely new tobacco from Mylan. And I would encourage you, if you're a fan of light English blends, because it's not very heavy, no nick hit at all. If you're a fan of light English blends, I would definitely recommend Joe's blend. And the cherry one too, if you're into that stuff. Okay, so back to the pipe. Hope you have a lovely week. As always, happy reading.